Ruthless gangs rule the streets of Chicago, selling drugs and leaving a trail of violence and death in their wake. One gang numbers 30,000 and generates $100 million in revenue per year. It will take the combined effort of the Chicago police, 5 federal agencies, and a determined assistant U.S. attorney to take back the streets. In December 1992, Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Seyfert took over the federal investigation of the Gangster Disciples, the most powerful and ruthless gang in Chicago.
I was a part of a team of agents and officers who went out there and were real heroes in their community. They did the job day after day, night after night, week after week, away from their families, doing tedious work, dangerous work, the work that builds the type of prosecution that changes a city, literally, changes the lives of people in the city.
In 1992, the city of Chicago was under siege. Vicious gangs turned thriving neighborhoods into wastelands. Leading a federal drug enforcement agency investigation into gang activity was Agent Rick Barrett.
Well, Chicago's always been a place where there's been a lot of gang activity, but at the particular time, crack cocaine was first hitting the streets of Chicago. The drug is very powerful, very cheap, produced a lot of income, profits for the gangs. Associated with that activity, of course, a great deal of violence. Murder was at an all-time high in Chicago, and crack cocaine was flooding the streets.
Chicago police worked to stem the tide of violence. But the lure of crack cocaine and the easy money that it brought fueled the gangs. Gang crime Sergeant Jim Darling saw firsthand their effect on what were once peaceful neighborhoods.
For the people in the neighborhoods, it was a constant fear of being shot or hurt, killed. These gangs had a stranglehold on these neighborhoods that, made good people afraid to come out in the street and to live a normal life.
The gangs brought with them more than their share of casualties. Anyone caught in the crossfire of turf wars fell victim. Police were fighting a losing battle. DEA agent Rick Barrett.
Just when you think they're gone, you come to work the next day, and they're all back. And it's just kind of a vicious cycle of pushing them from one street corner down to the next street corner, from the Englewood district down to the Gresham district, out to the suburbs, and back again. And they're always present on some street corner with an open drug air market. And the police have the toughest job in the world. I mean, their job is to keep the streets safe.
But with every gang member the Chicago police arrested, 2 more were waiting to step up. In late 1990, the DEA investigation began to focus on one gang in particular, the 30,000-strong Gangster Disciples. Mary Hodge worked with Rick Barrett on the DEA task force.
You have to understand that there was no starting point when we began the investigation. It was very little at best. We had one informant who was providing historical information about the Gangster Disciples and their hierarchy. He gave us a starting point, some names, and we began to follow up on those names.
Based on any information they could find, investigators used surveillance cameras to videotape drug deals taking place. But the tapes revealed little about the key to the gang, its leadership. Barrett's investigation was stalling.
We had several plates spinning at the same time, and actually we were going nowhere fast.
The investigation needed a fresh approach. The DEA turned to Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Safer.
After I became involved in this case, saw the amazing grip that the gangster disciples had on the community in Chicago, saw the huge damage that they were doing in the city of Chicago, I wanted to do something about it along with the team.
Safer learned the gangster disciples were one of the richest, most deadly gangs in the country. Gangster disciples were notorious for killing members who betrayed their code of silence. In Chicago's poorest neighborhoods, they used boys as young as 8 years old to carry their guns and drugs. Barrett knew the key to breaking the grip of the gangster disciples was to take down the gang's leaders.
Our focus from the beginning was on the leadership of the gang. One of the unique aspects of this investigation was the target was already incarcerated.
Larry Hoover was one of the 9,000 gangster disciples in the Illinois prison system. He was convicted in 1973 for murder. Investigators believed he was the ranking member of the gang, directing its activities both inside and outside the prison.
Quite frankly, there were a lot of people in DEA and outside of DEA that conceptually, I think, had a tough time understanding why we were targeting somebody who was already incarcerated.
Even though Larry Hoover was in prison, Ron Safer believed he was as much a threat to the community as if he were out on the street.
We knew that Larry Hoover somehow was communicating with the gang leaders on the street, because one thing everybody was agreed on, everybody we talked to inside the gang, anybody we talked to who had observed the gangster disciples, Larry Hoover was calling the shots.
Ron Safer met with investigator Mary Hodge to develop a strategy. To earn a federal drug conspiracy conviction, which carries the penalty of life in prison without parole, they needed more than witness testimony of the gang's violent acts.
I wanted to have a case that we could build that was unassailable, that would be on tape, where it didn't rely on some witness telling the truth. It relied on the words of Larry Hoover and his co-conspirators themselves. To do that, we focused on the drugs, the raison d'etat of this gang, not the violence, the money.
Safer ordered highly sensitive sound equipment brought in to separate Hoover's calls from those of the other inmates. But investigators realized Hoover never discussed business over the phone.
No, you just come see me.
Yeah, we're handling from there. Yeah, I got you.
All right, I got you.
From the Vienna Correctional Facility, he didn't have to. Investigator Mary Hodge.
Well, at that time, Vienna resembled a college campus. It was a minimum security facility. It had no fences, no walls of any type. It was a beautiful place.
Safer's investigators learned that Hoover stayed in touch regularly with his gangster disciples on the street. He had many visitors and was under little scrutiny. Prison logs revealed that Hoover's visitors were often gang members using aliases. The prosecutor needed probable cause to record Hoover's personal visits. He needed an insider with details of the gang. Finally, he found the right one. Early in 1993, in Decatur, Illinois, a gangster disciple named Charles Jello Banks made a drug sale to an undercover control working with the police.
Where's my money? I got the junk in the trunk, man. Come on. Yo, it's safe in here, man. Why are you playing in?
The arrest signal for the waiting federal agents was the raised trunk of the car.
Come on, man. Give me my stuff.
Get your hands up! Get your hands up now! Get him up! Get him up!
Charles Jello Banks was arrested and charged with the sale of narcotics.
Oh, you was in on this. That's funny. You're a funny guy. Well, because see, the thing is about what happened.
As part of an effort to get gang members to become informants, investigators met with Charles Banks. Knowing it could mean death, Banks agreed to defy the gang's code of silence.
There's some little stuff to that. Yeah, I can take care of this.
He told the prosecutor he had never met Hoover, but knew about the gang's internal structure. Banks gave Safer what he didn't have: key information on the gang's current organization and activities.
Larry Hoover devised, while he was in prison, a structure that would mirror a corporate structure. He placed himself at the top as chairman of the board of directors. Immediately beneath him was the board of directors. Approximately half of those members were incarcerated, and they controlled the prison system. Half of them were unincarcerated. They controlled the Gangster Disciples' operations on the street.
There was a large screen TV.
Banks' information supplied Safer with the probable cause he needed to secure a warrant to monitor Larry Hoover's private conversations with visitors.
The courtyard was adjacent. There was an entryway.
It would not be easy to penetrate Larry Hoover's domain, the prison he had come to rule.
We would take photographs of them from the warden's office.
Safer and his team knew that standard surveillance techniques would be ineffective. DEA agent Rick Barrett came up with an idea.
What about the visitors room?
You know, I started thinking about it, and a little light bulb went off in my head, and I thought to myself, bugging a visitor's pass, you know, maybe that's not just a crazy idea. I wonder if that could be technically possible, and let's get the group in here and let's brainstorm this.
This is the kind of badge we would use.
The prosecutor went to the deputy director of the Illinois State Department of Corrections.
That's right, we'd have a base outside the prison.
He wanted to create prison visitor badges that could be outfitted with tiny listening devices.
Put it like this, but I need your go-ahead, ultimately, bureaucrat.
What they said was, you create these visitor badges, and we'll implement them at 4 separate institutions so that nobody is terribly suspicious. Because if you introduce something new to a prison system, the prisoners will be quite alerted to the fact that there's something up. And they said, you need to put these badges in for a period of time before you can do anything, because you're going to get some chewed up, some destroyed, somebody searching through every inch of those visitor badges.
What's wrong with it? Hey, don't worry about it. They can notes to everything.
Safer's team began tape recording Hoover's conversations in October of 1993.
Hey, what's up, Shorty G? Hey, good to see you, man.
The conversations were recorded in Chicago, 350 miles away. But transcribing the tapes was a painstaking task.
The first thing that became apparent was these tape recordings were very difficult to hear. There was a lot of background noise, a lot of distractions, and of course, Larry Hoover and his visitors weren't screaming out the conversations about this illegal activity. And yet, we could hear it. It was tantalizing. They talked all about how the gang was making its money, directions from Larry Hoover about who would run the operation, directions about where the drugs would go, who they should get the drugs for. Everything you could imagine.
Six weeks later, The bug was discovered by one of Hoover's visitors. The recording stopped. Of the 55 hours of tapes, only 4 hours showed incriminating conversations between Hoover and his high command.
Which one was out, the juice?
The tapes revealed the scope of the gangster disciples' drug empire.
All right, let's see if we can find the...
But to stop Hoover, the prosecutor still needed to connect the gang to the drug money, and to prove that Hoover was personally responsible for the gang's activities on the street. In Chicago, Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Safer was building a drug conspiracy case. His target was Larry Hoover, a convicted murderer who controlled the 30,000-member gangster disciples from behind bars. Safer had taped hours of conversations between Hoover and his high command. But it wasn't enough.
We didn't have the drugs. We didn't have money. We didn't know how things ran on the street. It was a dry conspiracy, and those are very difficult to persuade a jury about.
One of the things that
The prosecutor turned to the Chicago police.
Nobody knew this gang like the Chicago Police Department, and specifically the gang specialists in the Chicago Police Department. So I knew we had to get the police involved if we were going to build this mountain of a case that I felt was essential to build.
Gang crime sergeant Jim Darling informed his team they would be working with the U.S. Attorney's Office in an effort to bring down the incarcerated leader of a gang they encountered on the streets every day. The team hit the streets, gathering evidence and reporting back to prosecutor Ron Safer.
The Chicago Police Department knew precisely where the gangster disciples' drug spots were. What the police department did was gathered evidence for us of these drug spots. They would go in, they would make undercover purchases, they would film these drug spots, and that was great evidence so that the jury could see with their own eyes this mundane process of selling bags of crack cocaine or heroin, $10 at a time.
Ron Safer explained to his team that all the gangster disciples' activities could be linked as a continuing criminal enterprise. Safer told them the gang's profits from the sale of illegal narcotics exceeded $100 million per year. He brought in federal prosecutor Matt Crowell to assist in the case.
And he literally walked around the room and he explained to all of us how we were going to be able to show that a person who sold a dime bag, $10 worth of crack cocaine, should be held to Larry Hoover, that he somehow ordered the distribution of those drugs, even though the two had never met.
Safer told the police that one of Hoover's many visitors, second-in-command Gregory Shell, discussed the purchase of a restaurant they could use to launder money. Shell's girlfriend, Sonia Irwin, would front the purchase. Irwin was a Chicago police officer and gang specialist. Safer had been tapping the phones at a restaurant, the Shrimp on the Nine, for months. Irwin's connection with the gangster disciples shocked fellow Chicago police officer Jim Darling.
Sonia was tied in with the gangster disciples. That did not go over well with us naturally, because you never want to see or have circumstances come about where you find out that a police officer, let alone a gang officer, is involved with the gangs, feeding them information, instructing them how the gang units work.
At 3 a.m. on the morning of September 27, 1994, the Chicago police coordinated with FBI specialists who set up surveillance equipment inside the Shrimp on the Nine restaurant. At 8 a.m., Gregory Shell arrived. Investigator Mary Hodge and her partner waited at their post.
I was monitoring the bug at a satellite office right across the street from the restaurant. Gregory Shell walks to the back room and points and says, "You don't have anything and you're not gonna have anything," and walked away.
The discovery of the surveillance equipment was a disappointment for the prosecution team.
Ron, Mary, he just discovered the camera and the microphone.
What? Could you see it? I mean, could you see the bug?
Sure, he walks into the restaurant, points to the camera, and says, "You ain't got nothing in you."
Either there was a leak, or someone had seen the FBI specialists setting up the surveillance equipment. Safer's team was now at a critical point in the investigation.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
DEA said, look, we are at wit's end. We must bring this thing down now. We don't have the resources to continue. At the end of 1994, we now had a lot of evidence. We had about 20 or 25 of the gang's top leaders. And at that point, I agreed. I said, okay, said to the team, all right, we're bringing this down. And Jim Darling stood up and he said, if you do that, we've accomplished nothing.
Darling and his team knew the streets. And they knew what would happen if the investigation stopped now.
Because there's a guy named Pops Johnson, and he is the most ruthless, the most evil of the gang leaders, and what you'll have done is you'll have created a huge vacuum which Pops will step right into it, and we will have accomplished nothing. Well, he was so forceful and so right that we could do nothing else but go after Pops and his organization before we brought this investigation down.
With the DEA no longer part of the team, the investigation pushed forward, targeting Pops Johnson.
I'm saying Pops a great man. That was his girl, man.
Safer asked his gang informant, Charles Jello Banks, to wear a wire and pay a visit to Johnson. Pops Johnson was outraged by Banks' visit. It was a breach of gang protocol. He told him to talk to his own governor, Cedric Parks. Safer ordered a wiretap put on Cedric Parks' phone. Mary Hodge supervised the operation.
They described the products and the prices of the products on that phone tap. One narcotic trafficker telephoned Cedric Parks and said that he wanted 1 ounce. And Cedric Parks tells him right away, don't say ounce, say juices. And he says, oh, okay, well then I want 1 juice. And therein lies the deciphering of their code.
In the early months of 1995, the Chicago police made dozens of arrests. Safer and his team had the beginnings of a federal conspiracy case against the elusive Larry Hoover. The prosecutor was encouraged when some of the arrested gangster disciples became informants. But the biggest break in the case, information that would prove pivotal, was still to come. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Safer's drug conspiracy investigation of gangster disciples boss Larry Hoover was gaining momentum. He enlisted the help of the Chicago Police Department in getting the gang's drug dealers off the streets. Hoover and the gangster disciples were mounting a campaign of their own in the court of public opinion. They initiated the political action group 21st Century Vote. Hoover's public influence grew. The group financed rallies, held voter registration drives, and backed candidates, including the former gangster disciple Wallace Gator Bradley, one of Hoover's most outspoken supporters. The goal was to change the public's perception of the gangster disciples. Bradley kept a high profile in the community, painting a picture of an organization whose goals were community outreach and improvement. Hoover renamed his organization Growth and Development. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Safer and his team of investigators believed Hoover was maneuvering for parole.
Larry Hoover was a lightning rod for discussion in the community. There were myriad articles in the local newspapers about how we should deal with Larry Hoover. We should release him on parole, and because he could reach the youth of our community that parents and teachers could not reach, and he could lead them to good.
Hoover forgot that federal prosecutors in Chicago had a history of standing up to organized crime and stamping it out. Ron Safer sent the IRS after gang-related organizations suspected of money laundering, including Save the Children Promotions, a rap concert production company run by Hoover's common-law wife. Investigator Mary Hodge led the raid. She discovered a file marked L.H. Sr., personal.
I found in a folder a list which indicated the gangster disciples hierarchy. It listed the board members, the governors, the regents, the count, and by the count I mean the number of people who worked under that particular individual. It also listed the opposing factions in their neighborhoods and in their areas.
Hodge ordered the file cabinet seized.
I took it to Ron Safer's office, and he and I just looked at it and reviewed it. I mean, we were elated. It was our case. I mean, it verified or validated everything that we were going to present in court.
Where's K-Dog?
K-Dog.
The elation was short-lived. On June 9, 1995, Charles Jello Banks, a gangster disciple cooperating with the investigation, was murdered on a neighborhood street corner by gang members. The prosecution team was crushed.
After Charles Banks was murdered, it became apparent to me that we would not have the luxury of time, that lives were at stake, and that we had to indict as quickly as humanly possible.
On August 31st, 1995, 250 law officers made a sweep through Chicago. They arrested 39 high-ranking gangster disciples, including Hoover's second-in-command, Gregory Shell, and his girlfriend, Sonia Irwin, a Chicago police officer. Hoover was arrested in prison at 4 a.m. and flown to Chicago. Charges were brought against Hoover and the other defendants. Ron Safer was ready to face them.
We are the toughest gang in town, and we intend
This time on his turf, the federal court.
No one steps in.
Activist Wallace Gator Bradley rallied support for Hoover, claiming he was a political prisoner. He was compared with Nelson Mandela and Malcolm X. Safer's biggest battle came before Hoover's trial even began. Defense attorney Anita Rivkin Carruthers filed a motion to have the incriminating tapes of Hoover's prison conversations with his gangster disciples' leadership suppressed.
I think the Vienna tapes should not have been allowed, basically because we believe that the government obtained these tapes illegally, in violation of the wiretap laws, in violation of the U.S. Supreme Court laws dealing with wiretaps.
Carruthers charged that of the government's 55 hours of secretly recorded conversations between Hoover and the other defendants, only 4 hours had been selected out for the jury to hear.
If you take the government's position and say, this is what Mr. Hoover said when he didn't know that the government was listening, you have to also take these portions where he also didn't know that the government was listening, and he talked about the good things that this organization was becoming and the things that this organization was doing to be helpful to the community.
The judge agreed. The tapes could not be used unless all 55 hours were transcribed. With the background noise and interference, this was a nearly impossible task. Safer knew that without them, there was a good chance the defendants would be acquitted.
We were able to convince the Court of Appeals that we did not have to transcribe all of those tapes, that the tapes could be admitted as they stood, and that was the Court of Appeals order.
Again armed with the incriminating tapes, Safer and his prosecution team headed for trial.
All rise.
With U.S. District Judge the Honorable Harry D. Leinenweber presiding.
Seated. Bailiff, bring in the jury.
Shouts of "Free Larry" could be heard in the courtroom, 19 floors above the street. The prosecutor defined conspiracy for the jury as an agreement to do something illegal.
Conspiracy doesn't protect you.
He showed the jury, in graphic detail, the Chicago that existed in the world of the gangster disciples.
The list that we found, Government Exhibit 1, and then Government Exhibit 2 was a graphic depiction of that list. I always felt that if we could just translate that battle plan, that list, onto a map and let the jury see that this wasn't the city of Chicago that they were living in. This was gangster disciple turf, that they thought they were governed by the mayor, but really they were governed by gangster disciple governor, in the gangster disciples' minds anyway.
Defense attorney Anita Rivkin Carruthers painted a different picture for the jury.
Yes. When I think of Larry Hoover, I think of two scenarios. One is this monster that the government wanted to create. That this was this horrible person who ran a gang from a prison for over 20 years. And then I think about the Larry Hoover, the individual that I know, who is a very bright, very articulate, a young man who has the ability to influence people, to encourage people to do the right things, a person who is just a very dynamic individual.
Call the next witness.
The prosecution called Robert Crawford to the stand. On January 19, 1995, Crawford, a low-level gangster disciple, had been arrested for selling crack cocaine to an undercover police officer. Crawford cooperated with the investigation.
Robert Crawford was a gang member, and he had tape recorded a gang meeting. He wore a wire into a gang meeting.
Yo, who's this guy on 45th Street selling on our corner?
What the tapes showed was everything that we had talked about. How there was a rival gang moving into a spot down the street, and how their boys were going to have to go over and they were going to have to shoot at them to get them off that corner. Was Rob Crawford's testimony critical? Absolutely not. Was the tape recording he made the indisputable evidence important to the case? It was. It was an example of the very things that we were telling the jury.
Defense have any questions for the witness?
In his cross-examination, defense attorney Alexander Salerno discredited Crawford's testimony.
Mr. Crawford, have you ever been arrested before?
He told the court not only had Crawford been arrested multiple times, he had a history of lying, especially to the authorities.
Have you ever lied to the police?
Yes.
We knew that the witnesses were suspect because the witnesses, for the most part, were gang members. And from the beginning of this case, I had pledged that we were not going to build the case on the words of any witness, that the case was going to be built on the tape-recorded evidence that we could gather. We would place a witness on the stand and have them testify, for example, about the activities that were going on in the collection of the drug money from the rank and file members. Then the defense attorneys would get up and that they would cross-examine this witness mercilessly. And they would show them to be the scoundrels and gangsters that they were. But then, as soon as they left the stand, we would play tape recordings of the defendants themselves talking about the collection of drug money from the rank and file members, just as the witness said.
The tapes also revealed Hoover's methods of luring new members into the gang.
There was a tape recording of Gregory Schell and Larry Hoover, which graphically illustrated how horribly premeditated the corruption of the youth was by Larry Hoover. They sat and they said, Larry Hoover said, you know, you got to make sure that that youngster, that he has something, that you give him the cocaine for free at the beginning so that he can go out and buy those sneakers, so that he has something in his pocket. And after a while, quote, he will know where it came from, and he will know that he would be nothing without you. Well, that's not true. That kid would be something but for the gang. But they sat there and insidiously plotted the corruption of the youth in their community and then executed that plot, child after child, in a horrible way.
The more the jurors listened to the tapes, the more the prosecutor was convinced they were learning the true nature of Larry Hoover and his gangster disciples. By the early 1990s, the 30,000-member gangster disciples ruled the streets of Chicago, selling drugs and doling out violence at the will of their leader, Larry Hoover. A combined task force of federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies worked to stem the tide of gang violence and destruction. An extensive investigation resulted in the arrest of Hoover and dozens of his top lieutenants on conspiracy charges. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Safer led the prosecution.
When did you first meet Larry?
Safer called Martha Page to the stand.
I met him at a party in 1970.
She had visited Hoover regularly while he was at Stateville Prison.
In 1983? So how's business?
I'm only selling about an ounce a day.
Page helped support herself by selling cocaine in small amounts.
Buy any more?
Hoover advised her that real money came from dealing in volume.
Yeah, but you can do better than that. Hey, you gotta sell big to make big.
Okay.
Hoover told Page that she would get a good price buying drugs from the gangster disciples and gave her a contact.
Tell them Larry sent you.
Profits from the cocaine you got.
She followed Hoover's advice and used gangster disciples' suppliers, including some of the defendants.
I wasn't...
And did you buy cocaine from the contact
Page's
you
drug
gave?
profits soared. The prosecutor asked if the money she made was hers to spend as she pleased.
Well, I wasn't allowed to spend it. Larry told me what to buy.
She bought clothes and jewelry for Hoover and paid legal fees for other gangster disciples.
I was afraid of him.
And what did you do?
She said she had to ask Hoover's permission for any money she spent on herself.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Defense may question the witness.
Have you ever used drugs?
Defense attorney Anita Rivkin Carruthers argued Page was an unreliable witness.
Have you ever sold drugs?
Page admitted she was a drug user and dealer.
During the years
She had
when
stolen
you
from the
sold
government
drugs,
repeatedly,
you also
cheating on taxes and receiving public aid that was not due to her.
We found that as the trial wore on, the defense would drag the cross-examination through to the end of the day. No matter how long before they ran out of substance, they would have it go to the end of the day, so we could not play the tapes immediately after their cross-examination. We would play it the beginning of the next day, but they effectively took a little bit of the starch out of that evidence.
Tom Morris, a Hoover insider, told the prosecutor he had stayed clear of gangs growing up on the south side of Chicago.
Did any member of the gang ever ask you to sell drugs?
He graduated from college and taught in the neighborhood.
Yes.
When he was approached by a gangster disciple leader about selling drugs, Morris finally gave in to the easy money.
He was an example of the face that Hoover was trying to put on the gang. His task was to go into the city of Peoria, establish it as a stronghold for the gangster disciples, to get involved in politics, get involved in the Build Peoria program, but most importantly, to develop the drug trade and have the gangster disciples control the drug trade in Peoria.
Defense attorney Carruthers questioned Morris about Hoover's aspirations for the gang to move into growth and development.
Gangster disciples were evolving into growth and development, into 21st century vote, into legitimate organizations that would be a faction of African Americans that would have to be dealt with as a voting bloc.
In his recross, prosecutor Ron Safer noted that selling drugs was the real priority for Hoover, and that few of the outreach plans ever came to fruition.
The restaurant and the child's program?
Throughout the trial, Safer was concerned that the courtroom atmosphere could result in the intimidation of the witnesses.
Why not?
What the gang did was they would pack the courtroom with current gang members, and they sat there in an extremely intimidating experience for those witnesses. The message was received by every one of those witnesses.
The state rested its case amid a gang-orchestrated campaign of protest and witness intimidation. Prosecutors worried that, despite their efforts, dangerous killers might go free. In the spring of 1997, Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Safer was seeking to dismantle one of the largest, most ruthless gangs in Chicago, the Gangster Disciples. He was prosecuting the top members of the gang and had played hours of incriminating tapes for the jury. Now, it was the defense's turn. Over the next 2 weeks, defense attorney Anita Rivkin Carruthers put more than 70 witnesses on the stand.
We called a lot of witnesses because one of the things that the government did was to allege that growth and development and 21st century vote were basically fronts for a drug organization. So we were able to bring in witnesses, the election commissioner, people who had civil organizations going to show that these were in fact legitimate organizations.
Prosecutor Ron Safer was unfazed by the defense claims.
Mr. Brown, you began
And they talked
breaking
about
the law
neighborhood
as a correctional
cleanups.
officer, did you not?
And they talked about political rallies and all of these things that the gangster disciples supposedly did that was good. But so what? Al Capone was one of the most charitable persons on the south side, west side of Chicago. That didn't mean that he wasn't a ruthless killer.
Carruthers called Wallace Gator Bradley. The attorney asked Bradley about a list police recovered during a raid at Save the Children Promotions. Prosecutors contended the list was a Gangster Disciples organizational chart.
When the 7-year-old girl was killed,
Bradley said he drew up the list of neighborhood contacts as part of a Gangster Disciples peace effort following the crossfire shooting death of a child.
Thank you.
He was somebody who spoke with some credibility. And what he was saying is the gangs have changed. They're organizations that were moving towards peace, that they were trying to reach children that couldn't otherwise be reached. I cross-examined him by trying to demonstrate that it was the gang leaders that could control the violence, could control the drug trafficking if they wanted to.
in this list that are different.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Return to your seat. Defense, any further witnesses?
The defense rested. Larry Hoover did not take the stand. After years of investigation and weeks of compelling trial testimony, the future of Larry Hoover and his top gang associates was now in the hands of the jury.
I remember exhausted at the end of the trial talking to Mary Hodge, and we agreed that we believed that the jury would do the right thing. But what if they didn't? What had we wrought if Larry Hoover were freed, if Larry Hoover were let loose on this city, having been acquitted of these charges, facing a certain then parole release? What had we done?
On May 9, 1997, the jury returned after only 12 hours of deliberation.
Will the defendants please rise? We, the jury, find the defendant, Larry Hoover, guilty on all counts as charged in the indictment.
The packed courtroom was silent as the judge's voice echoed the guilty verdicts for each of the defendants, effectively taking the top levels of the Gangster Disciples off the streets forever. In a separate trial, Darrell Pops Johnson was convicted for the murder of government informant Charles Jello Banks.
Larry Hoover, I hereby sentence
Larry Hoover's reign was over.
life sentences, 7 2
On June
years
18, 1998, he received 6 life sentences, 7 2-year sentences, and 3 4-year sentences, all to run concurrently.
5 years.
When I think of Larry Hoover, I think of a huge missed opportunity. This man was brilliant. He was raised, according to him, in a middle-class environment, by a mother who taught him values, who had values to teach. And if he had used that upbringing, if he had used his abilities in accomplishing something positive, he would have been the leader of his community that he claimed he was going to be. Instead, tragically, he led tens of thousands of people to their downfall.
Larry Hoover serves his sentence in a federal maximum security prison in Florence, Colorado. He lives alone, isolated in an 8 by 10 foot cell, 22 hours a day. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Safer's task force secured 131 indictments, taking back the city of Chicago from the Gangster Disciples.